Hello there, Bill Poss. I'm your host on Split Bill today, as I am every day, as at least so far. Let me get a guest host sometime. I've discussed it with a few people, but they haven't made it work yet. So today you're stuck with me. I have a great guest today. Most of you, if you're tuning in because of Moccasin Creek Festival, most of you will not have heard of Ed Skoog. Some of you know Ed because I know that you're tuning in from Lawrence, Kansas, or in some connection with the Upper Crew. But Ed Skoog is a poet and a teacher and a musician and a songwriter. He lives in Portland, Oregon, but originally from Topeka, Kansas. And I'm very excited to have him on the show today. So I'm going to get started with a song I wrote about a year and a half ago. I got my back to the sunset, watching as my shadow grows. Here it is almost tomorrow. Here I stand in yesterday's clothes. And you've been gone for a year now. Why can't I let you go? I keep looking over my shoulder, standing here in yesterday's clothes. You've asked me to give just a little, to compromise, find the middle. And those words rattled and rang like a riddle. Now the cold wind blows, it's coming on winter. The big oak tree looks so lonely and foolish without any leaves. I'm the only one who breathes, standing here in yesterday's clothes. You bought me blue jeans and flannel, wood smoke and clove filled my nose. The stockings hung from the mantle, but now they're just yesterday's clothes. Maybe I clean out my closet to reconsider the fashion I chose. Take a long hard look in the mirror, change out of yesterday's clothes. You asked me to give just a little, to compromise, find the middle. Those words rattled and rang like a riddle. Now the cold wind blows and it's coming on winter. Big oak tree looks so lonely and foolish without any leaves. I'm the only one who breathes, standing here in yesterday's clothes. I'm the only one who breathes, standing here in yesterday's clothes. Yesterday's clothes. All right, let's. Oh, I've lost Ed Skoog. I've lost him. Where'd he go? Come on back, Ed. Well, hang tight. There he is. Don't panic. He's back.
I'm back.
Hey, Ed, we lost you for a second, but I see you're back.
I'm back. Microphone said I had to start the browser again to connect it.
Oh, I see. All right. Very good. Well, I won't panic if you won't.
I look a lot better if you can hear me, is what I've learned. The beguiling tones can sort of make up for some of the deficits of the visage itself. The deficits of the visage. That's gonna be my next book. When are you going to write your next book, Bill? I love travelogue. You let me read it. Yeah.
I've actually written the next book. I'd share it with you if you want to read it, but I can't. It's not published or anything, you know.
Well, I'd love to read it. Love travelogue.
Yeah.
I had lots of advice for you on it, which I'm glad that you didn't take, because the shape that it was in was really suited it. I go back to it. It's one I could. I read it straight through when I got it, and then it's good for dipping in because it's travelogue kind of. this day,
Yeah,
that
see,
day, this story, that story.
it's good for the toilet, for the next to the toilet there.
Well, when toilet paper is in short supply, it's good to have some literature.
So what have you been working on writing wise, besides the deficits of the visage?
Well, I have a new book of poems coming out this month, which is really good timing because that's what people want, is some kind of difficult yet slightly folksy poetry. Too folksy to be satisfyingly folksy, and too difficult, not difficult enough to reward those who like difficult things. So that book's coming out this month. It's called Travelers Leaving for the City, published by Copper Canyon Press. My last book came out the week of the 2016 election, which also was not the time that people were looking for carefree memories of the Obama years. So,
yeah, I released an album on Tuesday, September 11th, 2001, where I happened to actually be in Winfield, Kansas at the Walnut Valley Bluegrass Festival. And I woke up in my tent, and that was release day, and I had all this press lined up and everything, and it all went to hell.
I was down there that year. I don't think we met that year.
Yeah, were you there at the time?
2000. Yeah. We'd driven up from New Orleans, where I was living at the time, with some musician friends, and it was nice being at Winfield that week because there was no TV. It was kind of before cell phones, so it was kind of nice to be away from the news.
Yeah, it was. At first, it was a little unnerving to not know what was going on, but after a minute, I felt better to not have it.
Yeah.
Be with my family. They're probably, it felt like a pretty safe place to be. So I want to talk to you about your taste in music. I know you're a bluegrass. I know you're a bluegrass fan. What else do you listen to? Who are the acts that write from a writing standpoint you really tune into?
Well, I like either things that are instrumental and melodic, or good storytellers. Yourself, Fred Eaglesmith, I like. I like James McMurtry, and the best thing I've heard, the most significant aesthetic experience I've had in a while was this band called the DeLines. You heard the DeLines?
I've not. I'm writing it down.
I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right. Delines, the DeLines. Now it's the songs are written by Willie Vlautin, Vlautin, who's also a novelist out here in Portland, although I don't know him. He had a band called Richmond Fontaine, you might recall.
I've heard of Richmond Fontaine.
Yeah. So that was his, band in our youth. It was fine. But the lines, it's a singer, woman from Austin. Maybe she was in the Meat Purveyors or something. Great, haunting, kind of mature voice. So she does all the singing and some Loughton's words. And it's just heartbreaking little short stories about people's lives falling apart and, feel good stuff.
Right.
Cheerful business that I find myself enjoying.
Have you ever checked out Dan Reeder?
No.
Dan Reeder.
Reeder.
He writes. Yeah, Reeder. He's a very unique writer. Very short songs and very repetitive, but it has an effect. At least on me. It's one of those guys who I think is one of the smartest writers going. In an artistic way.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Anyway, I went all Skoog or crush over him a couple of years ago when I discovered him, and he just recently put out a new video called "Born a Worm." Check that out. Born a Worm.
I'll check it out.
If you have psychedelics, I recommend that.
That can happen.
So you have your banjo handy there. We'd love to hear a song.
I do have it. Yeah. I've been playing with the band here in Portland called the Hill Williams. Just joining up as the banjo player. This is the one song that they let me do. It's really nice just being the banjo player. A lot of the things that I do, like teaching, poetry, professoring, or I'm required to show up and have an idea. Have some MC skills. But when you're just the banjo player, it's paradise. You just show up. My job is not to say anything, not to propose a notion. It's just to play banjo and not even play it particularly well, because that's showing off. I mean, just to show up and play it kind of quietly. That's a nice job. That's the happiest job, happiest it's ever been. Show up.
So far from any job I have.
They don't even let me carry stuff often. I kind of displayed early on my ignorance of soundboards, and so they don't let me bother with any of that. So that's working out pretty well. Looking forward to getting to play with them again. This is a song called "Oh Fire." Oh, fire, you burn me, even in the cold. And her love was always cold. And her love was always cold. Oh, water, you drown me, even in a drought. When her love is all run out, and her love is all run out. Oh, graveyard, you'll hold me, even when my trust in her love has turned to dust. And her love has turned to dust. Oh, fire, you burn me, even in the cold. And her love was always 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 cold.
Very nice.
I didn't want to show anybody the whole banjo, but it's there. In case you thought I was lip syncing.
So what are you playing there?
It's Deering. Little Deering nice, yeah. Deluxe. I got 1993, 94.
I've got an old Deering myself. Not that old. Not old enough to be valuable, but.
Yeah, this isn't particularly valuable. I was at Winfield a couple years ago, and Greg Deering was at the booth, and I sat down with it, and he kind of gave it an assessment. He gave me a B plus for how I've maintained it over the years. That was a lot better than I was expecting.
You asked for an assessment?
Yeah. Well, service they provide. It's like, have I ruined it, or am I playing it wrong?
Well, that's a different matter altogether, isn't it?
Well, it is. It is.
So,
Well, it's probably wrong to
so you
play.
have a podcast.
This is something I think about a lot. Is I'm not sure how right it is to play the banjo. I think most banjo players enter into it because they heard one and they wanted to kind of follow that sound and do it. But I mean, the history of the instrument is kind of darker than that and deserves, I think, a lot more introspection and thoughtfulness in its kind of roots in, white people playing it and minstrelry and, racial oppression and all that and profiting off of it. And I a lot of the kind of standard banjo songs, in addition to most people hearing the banjo and thinking of hoods, are kind of awful songs with awful histories. And I don't know, I can't put the banjo away, but I'm trying to get more educated and less offensive with it. But I mean, it's an inherently offensive to the ear. I mean, even if it's offensive to history and culture, I don't know.
Oh, I've lost this. Can you hear me?
Muted. There we go. How's that? It muted.
Yeah. I had my Bluetooth died. My Bluetooth earpiece died. So no big deal. I got you on the regular. So I'll resurrect it. But I mean, is it any different necessarily than the songs of murder and murder and mayhem that go with the banjo? I mean,
I think it is Girl. I think it's a little different because I mean, like Banks of the Ohio or things like that are, a lot of these songs are awfully. Women don't seem to be very well treated in a lot of these songs that we play, but at least they're mentioned. It's the absence of Black life in these songs that come out of Black life. That silence and the verses that have been omitted, the knowledge of the songs that was part of the original pleasure, which was not a good pleasure, have been kind of lost. And so I don't know.
I was not aware of that. I guess I'm glad you mentioned it because I didn't. That was not something that I was aware of. So thank you. And I grew up with banjo in my house. Yeah. I did understand that it came from a Black heritage, a Black history from Africa, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's an amazing. It's all of American history is in the banjo.
Interesting to me that you're the third banjo player I've had on Split Bill, and so far I have to specifically request an Earl Scruggs style song, even though all the people play Earl Scruggs style banjo. If I don't actually specifically request an Earl Scruggs style song, I won't get one.
Well, real quick.
There you go. Nice.
It's fun to do.
I don't know if I've ever told you, but my dad was my dad was a 5-stringer, and mostly just played the Scruggs style, and he did. I did have Robbie Folks on. He's a banjo player, but he wouldn't play the banjo for me, unfortunately.
He's a great banjo player.
I like that song where he talks about his aunt's new old man. What
Aunt Peg's new old man.
Aunt Peg's new old man. He didn't like the Scruggs style.
Yeah.
Not me. I'm the other way. Anyway, so let's shift gears just a second to talk about poetry.
Sure.
You said you're putting out a book of poetry soon on Copper Canyon Press.
Yeah, that's right. It's called Travelers Leaving for the City.
Okay.
And it's kind of centered around the murder of my grandfather in a hotel in Pittsburgh in 1955.
Wow.
Kind of tawdry story that was kind of left out of family lore. I had to kind of go back into newspapers to track it down in court transcripts.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of about that story and kind of about the silence and what it was like for my mother to raise 5 boys with, kind of this tawdry end for her father, and how that shaped her sense of how to kind of shape men,
Right.
for better or worse. But I was also just looking a lot about 1955 and life, which is kind of a turning point in the century, musically, certainly, and culturally. And it happened in Pittsburgh. And so there's a lot of, some of the poems are about these kind of this black and white photographer, W. Eugene Smith, who did this insane documentary photograph project of Pittsburgh at the time. I'd never been to Pittsburgh. I think it's too late now. I wrote a book about it. Seems like a nice place. Seems dangerous.
But places, yeah, I've been there a few times.
But it's also the book's about traveling and itinerants and hotels and strangers and being kind of lost and,
Was your grandfather not living in? Was he itinerant to Pittsburgh at the time?
No, he was from Pittsburgh. He was a steel worker. He was alcoholic. He was probably gay, and he was living in this hotel. And there was a lovers' quarrel going on. He wasn't involved with. He stepped in and got shot, trying to break it up.
I see.
Kind of heroic, trying to save somebody,
Yeah, sounds like Blaze Foley.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows? I mean, I don't know. You know more about it than I do, but
no, it seemed it was I don't know. It was I'm trying to think of like Blaze Foley, not like String Bean. I was trying to think of other musicians' deaths to compare it to. I don't know. Some of the music that ended up in the book, because I always end up writing about music, is I'm not really a Deadhead, but I'm familiar with the Hoover as a banjo player through kind of Old and in the Way and the Garcia Band acoustic things. And
right.
The band I'm in started out as an Old and in the Way cover band. And so I've been playing a lot with like a opening for a Grateful Dead, a popular local Grateful Dead tribute band, and kind of in that circle here, not becoming fonder and fonder of it. But I'm interested in sort of people getting lost in their pursuing their obsessions. There's still, several web pages dedicated to trying to find people who, deadheads who disappeared. I mean, it's a sort of subcategory of missing persons, which is people who disappeared around the time of the big Grateful Dead show,
Wow.
And so I think of people who, music is certainly an obsession of mine. And I think of ways that people get lost following their obsessions. One of the poems is about a friend of a friend who came to New Orleans when I was living there to go to a widespread Panic concert.
Yeah.
Halloween 20 years ago. And she came down from Birmingham, and she was about 17, and, she got lost and nobody could find her. And she was kind of a society girl. And my friend and kind of enlisted us to go around New Orleans trying to find her, and we didn't. And then we were having pizza a week later, and she comes walking down the street barefoot in a wedding dress, tripping out of her gourd, and had an adventure.
Wow.
So it was a poem about that. I just think of ways that we get lost pursuing our obsessions.
That's funny.
And ways we find ourselves too, But
that's funny you mentioned that, because the very first Moccasin Creek Festival, which is one of the festivals that I present, there was someone who was obsessed with Fred Eaglesmith, a Fred head, not a Deadhead.
Yeah.
And she disappeared. There was documentation, witnesses who said that they saw her walk out of the festival and into the field, and no one ever saw her again. And so I got contacted on Tuesday by the sheriff's department, and so then we had this conversation about it, and we tried to do as much reconnaissance as we could in terms of getting any witnesses, and that's what we found, was that she walked out into the field and we never saw her again. Well, she turned up in Birmingham, Alabama, and at a truck stop, or at a motel next to a truck stop or something. She had gotten a ride with a trucker, And Effingham's a trucking town. I mean,
but it's a fair ways from Birmingham, isn't it?
It's probably a 9 or 10 hour drive. Yeah. But anyway, maybe she was on her way to see the Vulcan.
The Vulcan's a powerful figure. Good town, Birmingham.
Yeah. Well, could you read us a poem from your new book? Or
sure. Well, I couldn't find my new one. I've got this is from the last book, Run the Red Lights, which is a lot of it's about music. The title is Alex Chilton's last words, actually. He was trying to get to the hospital.
Wow.
In time. So a lot of the books about Alex Chilton, Chiltonness, certainly an obsession of mine. But since we were talking about it already, they've got a poem about Grateful Dead tapes. As I said, again, not a Deadhead.
Okay.
Not opposed, but I'm, again, like with people get lost around the shows, it's such a cultural phenomenon. One of the other things that I found fascinating is kind of the taper culture, I always had roommates, the roommates who had the pot also had, those big display cases of cassette tapes, lovingly decorated, with the shows and the culture of sharing tapes back and forth, which was one of the things that those people ended up have a big influence on how the internet was designed, that kind of archiving. So this poem's about more the tapes than the band and children's music. Grateful Dead tapes. Even though we've already been dead, when I find 2 trays of Grateful Dead tapes in a Missoula secondhand store, I too feel bound in the stasis of cassette, plastic cases scarred and cracked like old scuba goggles. Some retain the delicate peg that lets the door swing open. Some have broken, maybe from a fall, when someone slid too fast the van door open in a hot hotel parking lot. Could be no tragedy made the tapes secondhand greater than a lost interest. Used to listen to them, the owner might say, the way you adjust to walking past a grave. I love him or her who curated these happenings, though the Dead's not really my bag. I follow other melodies and injured visions, draw my cider from another press, a cooler lava. I saw them once, summer of '95 at RFK with my friend Jax. It was terrible. A lot of 20th century business coming due at once. Bob Dylan opened unintelligible and sleepy, as if reaching from the frosts to make known, in life, I was Bob Dylan. The Dead would play 5 more stands, Auburn Hills, Pittsburgh, Noblesville, Maryland Heights, Chicago, and then done. Those last shows, autobiographies of indulgence. Lightning struck a branch. We left early. Tapers caught every note of the show. You can hear it forever at archive.org. In my greatest period of disorientation, the Dead, like death itself, seemed best avoided. Yet I was the sort who might admit a simplifying affection like the Dead. I remember coming down in a cornfield near a creek at dawn, talking it out with Jason, whether those trees were weird or that weirdness just took the form of trees. And every woman I pursued had a pet cat that made me sneeze. They either liked the Dead or Neil Diamond, yet I would persevere, like one with a disorder, hanging in the doorway to their petite kitchens while they ground coffee or searched the crisper for a roommate's hidden beer. I longed to become more elaborate. My approaches too simple and still are. Ask anyone about Pleasure's light opera and the children's music of the first kiss, the hair metal of the second. And now I play the Dead around the house. It's children's music. We play operettas, pinafore, Penzance for the same reasons, because they are kind and almost meaningless. I make few claims. What lasts is awkward chance, like this thrift store wrench anthologized on a pegboard, or smudges on a yellow phone, I'm not buying the tapes today. The price isn't marked and the clerk's busy. I keep what marriage and child need, a few books and held back objects, metal or paper, letters from old loves, because letters are antique, and for the limestone antiquity of those affections.
Oh man, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
That was a nice ride.
I wrote that a while ago. Yeah. Wrote that almost immediately after finding what the poem's about, a bunch of cassette tapes at a thrift store, and knowing what I know about Deadheads is some things end up in a thrift store because you don't want them anymore, but some treasures can only be there because something remarkable and maybe unpleasant happened.
A couple of times I lived with a. When I was homeless, living in my truck, I always kept an address, and my friend Meredith in Austin always let me stay with her. I mean, I kept my stuff in her garage and everything when I wasn't there. But I got my mail in Austin all that time. She was not a Deadhead exactly, but she was part of that world, and she had all those tapes that people would give her tapes all the time, and I was never a pot smoker, but they would sit around and some of her friends would get really high, and almost always it would break out into an argument, and it had to do with like the order of songs that they played in the Philly show in 1991. It was and also there was a guy in a band that I was in, and we were trying to learn some songs. It was different, and they're like, "Well, do you want to do it like they did it in San Fran?" I'm like, "Shut the up." But I have no patience because I'm not part of that world, and so I didn't even know where to enter the conversation.
Well, it's a religion. It's a religion, and like most religions, it seems hokey and phony outside of it, but inside of it, it's just endless richness.
Yeah. I think
I'm not on the inside of it. I see.
Fish fans can be very much like that. Leftover salmon.
Yeah.
But
I don't know what's the closest thing you have to that.
Obsession.
Yeah.
Oh, I was certainly John Prine would be. I mean, I don't know. I don't feel competitive about it at all, but I do feel religious about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, when he died, I waited 3 days and looked to the east.
That was hard. The only other musician I felt that sad about passing was Bill Monroe in '93 or '94.
Right.
I've been sad about a lot of others.
You were sad about John Prine?
I was very sad. Yeah. No, it felt like a family death.
That's absolutely. To me, it was like my dad died again for me.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Not because I thought of John Prine as my dad, but because my dad taught me about John Prine.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was very sad. It was very sad.
I'm actually taking part of it. I should announce that I should make a couple of announcements while I'm in the frame of mind for it. I'm going to be part of a John Prine tribute night for the Rose Bowl Tavern on Saturday night, and I'll hopefully have more details about that soon. So I'll be singing 2 songs. I'll be singing "Egg and Daughter Night."
That's a great one.
I love.
What a gift that last album, right?
Oh my goodness! I listened to that record so many times in the last 2 years. Just love that record. Yeah, and when I get to heaven, I mean, can you believe? I mean, this is or the Friends of Science. It just goes on and on. Like, it's like the beginning to the end of that album was he knew he was leaving or something. And I don't think he did, but kind of felt.
Well, I think he did from the cover. Like when I saw somebody. The difference between the cover, just like the picture of it on your computer or something, and the actual vinyl image, you see that he's very much intentionally like he's in a coffin or something. I think he had a good sense of humor about dying. He did from the beginning, you know.
Yeah.
You said you had a couple other announcements.
Yeah. Please don't bury me. Yeah. So the other song I'm singing is Picture Show, which is the very first song on the Missing Years album, Grammy-winning album of his from 1991. Anyway, so my guest for the rest of the week, tomorrow I have Austin songwriter, great songwriter by the name of Adam Carroll, really top flight songwriter, performer. On Thursday, I have Americana legend from Canada. Maybe it's not Americana, maybe it's Canadiana, but Tom Wilson from Blackie and the Rodeo Kings will be joining me. He's never a dull moment when Tom Wilson's around, I'll tell you that for sure. And then on Friday, we have a young lady who I am not that familiar with. I heard her at Folk Alliance, and I was immediately just taken by her. She was just really talented. I'm going to say she's about 22 or 23 years old. Her name is Haley Reardon. And if you look her up, you'll be tuning in on Friday. Then I said on Saturday I have a benefit, not a benefit, but I guess it's a benefit, but it's also a tribute to John Prine. I'll be joined by a bunch of other performers, and I'll tell you more about that when I get the information. What else? That's all I got. I got some exciting guests coming up next week, but I haven't got them locked down to dates yet, and I will let you know when I get that straightened out. So those are my announcements.
Prime was very important to a lot of the poets that I know who otherwise don't have an ear for music. Ted Kooser, who was the poet laureate of the country about 10 years ago, the first thing he did upon becoming poet laureate was invite John Prine to Washington, D.C., and they had an hour-long conversation with a couple of songs there at the Library of Congress, which is easy to find. I found I know a lot of people who have bad taste in music or no ear for music, but are kind of words people who like him and aren't familiar with much else, you know.
But it's funny that how people fall into John Prine, and so I immediately assume that they're hip to all kinds of other stuff, right? Like they might be a Jimmy Buffett fan, and that's how they got to John Prine, and they may have just stopped. They didn't extend to Steve Goodman or Robbie Fulks or whoever's now, or John Fulbright, whoever is now, but they just stayed there with John Prine, and that's cool. I mean, I guess Jason Isbell would be the now, but he's if you like him, are you a Jason Isbell fan?
No, he's fine. No, he's fine.
Yeah,
I got no problem with it. I don't know if today's John Prine, but he's.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he's new. He's to me.
He does. He's good.
He probably feels old to young people, but to me, he's young. So
just old enough to be young, just young enough to be old.
We should say hi to all the yeppers out there. There's a bunch of yeppers I see popping up here. We got Doug Byers and Legine Rao Keen.
Yep.
And there's only two. I don't know, but they're active.
Well,
they're making lots of comments and stuff.
That's good. That's good. I miss that crew. It's a good group there. The Winfield, my Winfield crew.
Oh man, yeah.
I only get down there every third or fourth year at this point, but.
Oh, Sean Bruce is watching. All right.
Oh no.
Don't you have a political history with Sean Bruce?
Well, I was the campaign manager for Sean Bruce. We ran him for student body president at Kansas State University. And that he didn't have a jacket, a sports coat of any kind. I lent him mine. I thought we did pretty good.
Yeah.
He didn't win.
No.
But I don't think it was my fault. He should have won.
Yeah.
Should have, ought to won. Mm-hmm. It'd be good. He's in charge of the Piano Tuners Association, or not in charge. One of the people in charge of the guild for it. And I think that is, he did that, and he was also the communications guy for the National Auctioneers Association. And those are two of the weirdest jobs anybody I know has ever had. It's weirder than being an auctioneer or a piano tuner. being the communications director for the Guild of the Piano Tuners.
Well, yeah, it doesn't. Somehow it doesn't surprise me at all that would be the case.
Yeah,
that he would have done that job. He sends me the oddest messages. I get these messages from him, and they're such detail involved in what he's writing. He got me to ask Robbie Folks a couple of weeks ago about bridges. I think it was. And I didn't. Evidently, it's a thing with him, but I learned a lot. Thanks to Sean for that, Sean.
No, Sean's a great writer, great songwriter.
Yeah.
Great fellow. Just lost his dad, which is a shame because his dad. If you're an original like Sean, you can assume that whatever it was that came before you was mighty weird as well. And that was the case with old Cliff Bruce, who told me when we were in college, we were getting philosophical, and he said, if I had it all to do over again, I'd floss.
Right on. Well, hey, can we get another song out of you yet? There's people are getting antsy for some songs here.
Yeah. Let me get a song here.
Oh, Trista's watching too. So that's 4, it looks like, at least.
Oh, that's good. That's good. This song is called Fast and Accurate, Verna Brown, named after there was a typist in Missoula, Montana, when I was in school there, who had an ad in the paper every day that was just Fast and Accurate, Verna Brown, and then her phone number. I think it must have indicated that she was a typist. And I just cut that out and carried it around for years on my little idea board, thinking I'd do something with it someday, and eventually I wrote this song. Partly because I looked back to see if there's any proof of her since the internet, and found her obituary, which was extensive because it turned out that she was a much beloved figure in Missoula. And there are a lot of writers around Missoula, Montana, especially in the 70s and 80s. Richard Hugo, James Crumley. And it turns out she did most of their typing. Like they would send her their manuscripts, and she'd turn them around and put them together. So this is a jingle that I wrote for her, even though she's no longer with us. All right. 406 311 3977 140 words a minute, not a minute to frown. Call Fast and Accurate, Verna Brown. If you want to write a letter, but you don't know how to type something better than a lovesick howl, call the typist, she's the best in town. That's Fast and Accurate, Verna Brown. If you got some feelings that you need to send, that love affair doesn't have to end. Won't tell nobody, don't need to be told, though Verna Brown is getting old. Typewriters and passenger trains, bluegrass music and whipping cranes are disappearing as the coastline drowns. So is Fast and Accurate, Verna Brown. You know I love you is how you might begin those nouns and verbs full of lust and sin. How do I know she broke my heart down? did fast and accurate Verna Brown. Can't walk down the street without somebody calling her name. Accurate speed brought her great fame. They sent her flowers, they're great big bouquets, 'cause Verna Brown knows the secret ways. So call 406-311-3977. 140 words a minute, not a minute to frown. Call fast and accurate Verna Brown.
That was a ride.
Yeah. It's weird to play to a webcam. I'm like a little cam girl.
Maybe you'll go viral like that little girl with the song. You see that?
Madonna?
I don't know what her name is. There was this girl who was singing a song. I want to know what's in your butthole, and
I missed that one.
it was the funniest thing I saw for weeks and weeks. I tell you, it was could be aliens, could be an astronaut, could be an alien. That's what she said. So
yeah, well, she's not wrong. Raising of children is often overlooked.
You got that right. All right. Well, Ed, it's been a lot of fun talking to you. And
Bill, it's real nice catching up a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let these folks go and get back to my work. But it's good to see you, and let folks know where they can get that book. Is it coming out soon, or like this week?
You can get it on bookshop.com, indiebound.org or com, and I mean, Amazon will get it to you when they want.
Tell us the name one more time.
Travelers Leaving for the City.
Travelers.
It's Copper Canyon Press, available now.
All about the murder of his grandfather from 1955 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Poetry.
Poetry.
Thank you, sir.
Verse. Yeah. Thank you, Bill.